Good evening, America. I'm Rachel Maddow, and tonight we start with breaking news from the Eastern Front highlighting one of the most significant tactical achievements Ukraine has accomplished in months. An advancement that military analysts are calling a potential game-changer in the struggle for the Donbas region. Ukrainian troops have successfully fielded a weapons system that Russian military planners never expected to encounter on this battlefield. A British-provided capability that Moscow's air defense infrastructure was simply not engineered to counter. Yes, you heard that correctly. The sophisticated weapons platform that the United Kingdom has been developing in secrecy for years. The system that was intended to remain classified well into the next decade has now been delivered to Ukrainian forces and employed in combat operations with devastating efficiency against Russian positions thought secure from this type of attack. This is not merely another story about Western military assistance or the gradual delivery of conventional armaments that has defined much of the support Ukraine has received. This is a fundamental shift in operational capabilities that threatens Russian dominance of airspace in key areas and showcases British readiness to equip Ukraine with some of the most advanced military technologies in the Western arsenal. The weapons system in question has been characterized by military experts as a revolutionary concept for air defense and offensive strike missions, a platform that merges multiple functions in ways that current Russian countermeasures cannot effectively address. The veil of secrecy surrounding this British weapons system was broken when Ukrainian forces utilized it against a Russian command complex situated deep behind the front lines in occupied Donetsk region. According to military analysts who have reviewed early reports and imagery from the strike, the system achieved total surprise, bypassed Russian air defense networks that were operational, and delivered precision effects against the target with accuracy indicating advanced guidance systems and real-time intelligence integration. You should pay close attention here because what is unfolding represents more than a single successful strike, or even just the immediate tactical outcome of eliminating this specific Russian installation. It is a moment revealing fundamental truths about the evolving nature of this war, about British dedication to supplying Ukraine with capabilities that can genuinely transform battlefield dynamics, about Russian exposure to weapons that the military planning did not anticipate, and about the likelihood that Western nations are prepared to cross thresholds in military support that seemed improbable just months ago. For weeks, military observers have noted unusual British military transport flights arriving in Poland and Romania, monitored heightened activity at Ukrainian military training facilities in Western regions, and speculated on whether the United Kingdom was preparing to deliver a new category of military aid beyond the conventional systems publicly disclosed. Now, we have confirmation. And if you find this type of detailed military analysis valuable, if you want to understand not only what happened with this British weapons deployment, but also how it operates and what it implies for the larger costs of the war, please hit that like button immediately. Subscribe to the channel and enable notifications because this story is unfolding in real time. As Ukrainian forces incorporate this newly acquired capability into their operational efforts, and as Russian units rush to develop countermeasures, we must ensure people comprehend that Britain's choice to supply this advanced weapons platform represents both remarkable military assistance and a potential strategic shift that could redefine the balance of capabilities in crucial ways. Now, let's explore precisely what this British weapons system entails, how it operates differently from conventional platforms Ukraine has previously employed, and what renders it extremely difficult for Russian forces to neutralize. Let's clarify what is observable based on data provided by Ukrainian military authorities, from analysis of strike recordings that have been publicly released showing the weapons' effects, from Western intelligence evaluations shared with select media personnel, and from Russian military communication channels whose discussions of this emerging threat reveal authentic concern about how to counter it. The British weapons platform that Ukraine has fielded merges aspects of drone technology, precision targeting, and advanced propulsion in a design that defense experts characterize as fundamentally distinct from standard missiles or unmanned aerial vehicles. According to sources familiar with the system's capacities, it can function at altitudes and velocities that render detection exceedingly difficult, can modify its flight trajectory in response to threats or targeting updates, and can deliver warheads with accuracy measured in single-digit meters against objectives situated dozens of kilometers from launch sites. This is not merely a headline about Ukraine receiving another shipment of Western military hardware, an occurrence that takes place routinely as allied nations continue support. It is evidence of Britain making a purposeful choice to share technology that was previously classified at the highest levels, representing years of research and development investment, and that British defence planners had intended to reserve for the most critical national security scenarios. The system's official designation remains classified, with British Ministry of Defence representatives declining to confirm specific details regarding its capacities or the conditions under which it was provided to Ukraine. Nevertheless, military analysts who have examined the strike effects and the limited data released have drawn inferences about the category of weapon this represents and why it is so consequential. According to specialists who have reviewed the evidence, the British system appears to feature stealth properties that minimize its radar signature to levels making detection by Russian air defense networks extraordinarily challenging. Let that register for a moment. We are discussing a weapon capable of penetrating Russian air defense coverage, which includes some of the most sophisticated systems in Moscow's inventory, able to navigate intricate battlefield conditions where electronic Wi-Fi and jamming are persistent, and capable of delivering precise strikes against objectives that Russian commanders assumed were protected by distance and defensive systems. The tactical acumen required to deploy this system effectively against fortified Russian defenses signifies a level of military expertise that Ukraine has been cultivating with Western assistance throughout this conflict. Yet, this reaches entirely new dimensions when paired with advanced British technology. Here is where the operational importance becomes apparent, and why military analysts are observing these developments with close scrutiny. The Russian command hub targeted during the initial deployment of this British system was not just another forward operations center or tactical command point that could be engaged with conventional artillery or drone attacks. It was a heavily fortified facility situated more than 50 kilometers behind the front lines, encircled by multiple tiers of air defense, including short-range systems designed to intercept drones and missiles, medium-range systems providing area coverage, and electronic Wi-Fi assets capable of jamming guidance mechanisms and communications. Russian defense planners had evaluated this site as secure from Ukrainian strike capabilities, based on its depth behind the front lines and the surrounding air defense. That assessment proved disastrously incorrect. What renders this British weapons system genuinely remarkable is not merely that it breached Russian air defenses, but instead the methods it employs and what those tactics indicate about how Western military technology has progressed beyond what Russian countermeasures were intended to counter. Consider the difficulties involved in executing a precision strike against a target situated deep behind enemy lines and shielded by active air defenses. The weapon must stay undetected during its approach, evading radar detection through stealth features or flight paths that exploit gaps in coverage. It must navigate to the target accurately despite Russian electronic warfare measures that can disrupt GPS and other guidance signals. It must recognize and strike the correct target, even if the operational environment contains decoys or if the target has been disguised or hidden. And it must deliver its warhead with precision sufficient to achieve intended effects against a potentially fortified facility. This did not occur by chance or because Russian air defenses merely failed to react. Multiple sources, including Russian military channels, report that air defense systems were active and functioning normally during the strike, that radar operators were monitoring their screens for incoming threats, and that electronic Wi-Fi systems were performing as intended. The British weapon succeeded in spite of these Russian attempts, demonstrating that its design features surpass the defensive capabilities that Russian forces maintain. The response from Russian military channels and official announcements exposes the surprise and concern that this advancement has caused. Russian military bloggers, who usually provide confident evaluations regarding their forces' capabilities, have expressed alarm regarding a weapon system that can breach defenses they assumed were reliable. Official Russian military statements have confirmed that a strike took place, but have refrained from offering specifics about the weapon used or the degree of damage caused. A trend that generally signals the event is more serious than Moscow intends to disclose publicly. Behind the scenes, Russian military planners are hastily working to comprehend this emerging threat and to develop countermeasures. According to Western intelligence analyses shared with journalists, Russian air defense units have been instructed to adjust their operational protocols, to elevate alert statuses, and to attempt detection of threats that their systems may not be fully optimized to track. Russian electronic warfare assets are being redirected to try jamming the guidance systems this British weapon utilizes, and Russian commanders are being compelled to reassess which installations and positions are genuinely secure from Ukrainian strike capabilities. Now that this advanced weapon has arrived on the battlefield, picture being a Russian officer tasked with defending high-value targets behind the front lines. Having been assured by air defense experts that multiple layers of coverage deliver sufficient protection, suddenly realizing that a weapon you never expected to encounter has penetrated all your defenses and struck a facility you considered secure. Imagine the questions from superiors demanding explanations for why existing air defenses failed. Which intelligence lapses permitted this weapon to be deployed without prior warning? And which procedures might prevent comparable strikes against other critical installations? That is not merely tactical surprise or operational setback. That represents an all-encompassing failure in threat evaluation and defensive strategizing that casts doubt on basic Russian presumptions about space dominance. The United Kingdom's choice to supply this advanced weapons platform to Ukraine marks a notable shift in British defense strategy and provokes significant inquiries about Allied assessments regarding appropriate extents of military support. For months, Western nations have calibrated their military aid meticulously, delivering capacities that bolster Ukrainian defensive and offensive operations while striving to prevent escalation beyond thresholds that could trigger wider conflict. The British administration under Prime Minister Keir Starmer has been among the most outspoken proponents of Ukraine, consistently promoting robust military assistance and advocating for Ukraine's ability to strike legitimate military targets irrespective of location. The decision to transfer this specific weapons platform seems to reflect British judgment that the strategic advantages of equipping Ukraine with genuinely transformative capabilities surpass the risks that such transfers might instigate Russian escalation. According to British officials who have briefed journalists on the decision, the weapons platform was delivered with precise parameters concerning its deployment, including limitations on certain classes of targets and requirements for coordination with British military advisors before executing strikes. Nevertheless, the core capability has been transferred, granting Ukraine access to technology that considerably broadens its strike possibilities and threatens Russian positions previously deemed secure. Consider how this decision was formulated at the uppermost levels of British governance. Military planners needed to evaluate whether this weapons system could truly change battlefield dynamics in ways that justify transferring classified technologies. Intelligence agencies had to appraise the dangers that the system or its technology could fall into Russian hands or that its functions could be compromised during operational use. Political authorities had to balance the advantages of providing enhanced capacities against the potential that such transfers might elicit Russian retaliation or complicate diplomatic negotiations. Incorporating this British weapons system into Ukrainian operations demanded extensive preparation, instruction, and coordination between British and Ukrainian forces. Military sources familiar with the transfer indicate that Ukrainian personnel received specialized training regarding the weapons operation, maintenance, and tactical deployment at secure facilities outside Ukraine. British military advisors collaborated with Ukrainian commanders to devise tactics and procedures for effective employment of the system while safeguarding it from Russian countermeasures or capture attempts, and operational security protocols were enforced to prevent Russian intelligence from discovering the weapon's presence prior to combat utilization. The successful initial strike implies that this integration procedure was efficient, that Ukrainian forces have mastered both technical and tactical aspects of the system, and that operational security measures blocked Russian forces from anticipating this novel capability. Analysts note that successful integration of advanced weapons typically demands months of preparation. The lapses in training or coordination often yield unsuccessful employment or equipment loss, and that Ukraine's successful deployment of this system during its first known combat use signals high competence among personnel and units entrusted with this capability. What heightens this achievement is that Ukraine had to merge this British system into its existing military framework, coordinating with intelligence assets to pinpoint appropriate targets, with air defense units to ensure the weapon was not intercepted by friendly forces, and with operational commanders to guarantee its deployment aligned with overarching campaign objectives. The effective coordination across all of these dimensions illustrates Ukrainian military organizational competence that goes beyond merely operating individual weapon platforms to executing complex joint operations that necessitate synchronization across multiple domains. The targeting of the Russian command complex for the initial strike using this British weapon was not random, but reflected deliberate operational planning intended to optimize both immediate tactical impacts and broader strategic signaling. Military analysts who have examined the target observe that it functioned as a coordination center for Russian forces across a major section of the front, that its destruction interrupts Russian command and control capabilities in ways that may take weeks to restore, and that the strike evidences Ukrainian capacity to threaten facilities that Russian commanders assumed were protected by depth and defensive arrangements. The psychological ramifications of this strike extend beyond the immediate operational disruption. Russian officers at other command sites behind the front lines now recognize that their positions are exposed to a weapon system that their air defense networks cannot reliably intercept. Russian military planners are compelled to re-evaluate their assessment of which facilities and capabilities are secure from Ukrainian attacks. Furthermore, Russian political leadership must face the reality that Western nations are equipping Ukraine with increasingly advanced capabilities that endanger Russia's ability to sustain military operations. According to Ukrainian military officials who have commented on the strike, the choice to employ this British weapon against this specific target was determined at the highest echelons of military command, in coordination with British advisors, with the understanding that the strike would expose the weapon's existence and capabilities to Russian forces. The reasoning appears to have been that the operational advantages of hitting this high-value target outweighed the costs associated with losing the element of surprise regarding the weapon's existence, and that demonstrating this capability would produce broader strategic consequences in terms of deterring Russian actions and signaling Western commitment to Ukrainian success. The technical sophistication of this British weapon system reflects years of research and development investment across areas including stealth technology, precision guidance, propulsion systems, and resistance to electronic warfare. Military specialists who have evaluated the limited data available regarding the system's capabilities note that it incorporates design elements that counter specific vulnerabilities of conventional missiles and drones, that it employs guidance mechanisms resistant to jamming and spoofing, and that its flight characteristics make interception by existing air defense systems highly challenging, even when the weapon is detected. The stealth features seem to involve both shaping that diminishes radar cross-section and materials that absorb or deflect radar signals. The guidance system apparently integrates multiple methods, including GPS, inertial navigation, and possibly terrain matching or target recognition algorithms, enabling accurate navigation even if some guidance methods are disrupted. The propulsion system delivers speed and maneuverability that complicate interception while retaining sufficient range to strike targets deep behind enemy lines. Additionally, the warhead is engineered to achieve precision effects against fortified or concealed targets. This convergence of capabilities produces a weapon system that is qualitatively distinct from the drones and missiles that have predominantly shaped Ukrainian strike operations throughout this conflict. While Ukrainian forces have achieved notable outcomes with modified commercial drones and Soviet-era missiles adapted for modern warfare, those systems have constraints in range, payload, accuracy, or survivability that can limit their effectiveness against certain classes of targets. The British weapon system mitigates many of these limitations, providing Ukraine with a capability capable of threatening targets that were previously out of reach or too well defended to strike successfully. The deployment of this British weapon system in the Ukraine conflict carries implications that extend far beyond the immediate tactical triumph of the first strike. It signifies a threshold shift in Western military support, demonstrating readiness to supply advanced capabilities previously considered too sensitive for transfer. It changes the risk calculus for Russian military operations, compelling commanders to take into account a new category of threat when deploying forces and establishing facilities. And it potentially opens the possibility for additional transfers of advanced Western military technology as nations reconsider what capabilities they are prepared to provide to Ukraine. This weapons system offers options for carrying out strikes against high-value targets that were previously difficult or impossible to engage. Russian command centers, logistics hubs, air defense nodes, and other essential military infrastructure located behind front lines now confront a real threat from a weapon capable of penetrating defensive coverage and delivering precision effects. This capability supports Ukrainian operational planning by putting at risk the systems and facilities that enable Russian military operations, potentially disrupting logistics, command and control, and force concentration in ways that create openings for Ukrainian forces. For Russia, this development presents serious challenges that will demand substantial resources to address. Air defense networks that were designed to counter existing threats must be adjusted or supplemented to attempt detection and interception of this new weapon type. Force deployment decisions must take into consideration the increased vulnerability of facilities and positions located behind front lines. And operational planning must factor in how to maintain military operations when critical nodes and capabilities face ongoing strike threat from a weapon that current defenses struggle to counter. The broader strategic message concerns Western resolve and dedication to Ukrainian success. The decision by the United Kingdom to supply this advanced weapon system signals that at least some Western nations are prepared to escalate their military support beyond the careful calibration that has characterized aid packages throughout much of this conflict. Other Western nations will be observing to see whether this British decision provokes Russian retaliation or escalation, and depending on Moscow's response, may re-evaluate their own policies regarding what capabilities they are prepared to provide Ukraine. Following Ukraine's deployment of this advanced British weapon system and successful strikes against targets Russian commanders assumed were secure, the narrative that emerges concerns technological advantage, British willingness to provide classified capabilities to support Ukrainian operations, Russian exposure to threats they did not anticipate, and possibilities that the military balance could shift in ways that modify operational dynamics. The deployment of this British weapon represents one development within the much longer story of this war, a significant development that demonstrates capabilities and commitments, but which must be interpreted as part of a wider campaign whose ultimate outcome remains uncertain.